All right. Well, let's get this rodeo going. Let's start where you started from, like where you were before you went into the military and kind of what led you there, because it all involves psyche and perspective and drive and all that good stuff. So, we don't just do it as the good idea fairy. There's something that drove us that direction.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm happy to start there. I think that's very suitable. Um, I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. I was born in Colorado and spent my childhood playing soccer. That's what I wanted to do when I was getting older. And then as I went into high school and middle school and started looking at college, there wasn't like any scouts looking for our particular high school. It's not like we were a very prestigious high school. No scouts were coming to check us out. So the writing was essentially in the walls of, well, I better figure out academically what I want to do before I enter into college. So all my friends going from high school to college, they were all pretty intelligent folks. They were going in for engineering degrees, and they had big plans to work at Raytheon and IBM. And I was not that way, but those were my friends, and I didn't know anything different, and I just wanted to hang out with them still. So I couldn't afford to go to a university. I didn't get scholarships that they got, and so they all went to the U of A or NAU, all these different universities, and we were middle class, low income type family, and so I went to community college in Tucson, community college, and I went there. I was very into space stuff, so I wanted to be an astronomer. And as I went to college for the first year after graduating high school, I looked around at the people that were around me, and I was like, man, like space is interesting, but there is a lot more I could be doing. And like, there's a lot of older folks around me, and they are not fun. And this is not what I anticipated as an 18, 19-year-old kid. And I was like, there's certainly got to be something else out there. And my dad had spent several years in the Air Force. My grandfathers spent years in the Air Force. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna go down that route. Let me just investigate and explore that pathway. As I went to an Air Force recruiter, took YASVAB, performed really well on that, and they're like, hey, you can pretty much do anything you want. And I looked through all these lists of jobs, and I was like, you know what? Like, maybe this is my pathway to go link up with my buddies, my pals from the past. And so I chose to be a nuclear weapons apprentice. And I was like, that's a pathway to Raytheon, pathway to IBM to get a decent job working with weapon systems and catch up with my buddies. I'll go back to Tucson and work there and spend 4 years in this particular job, get schooling paid for. That was it. That's what was going on in my head. So I walked out of the recruiting office, and next door, that's like a recruiter suite. And so there was an Army recruiter next door, and this dude was standing outside, and he said, hey, son, you want to be in Special Forces? And I was like, not really, but I never thought of it. So, but give me your pitch. Sell it to me? And he brought me in. He told me everything about it. And he's like, yeah, sign up for this, get this amount of money, do these things. And I was like, that sounds really cool, but I don't want to be in the Army. And so
he's like, I'm going for the higher intelligent military service, please.
Yeah, just my parents and my grandfather's like, hey, lifestyle's better in the Air Force. Living conditions are always going to be better. I was like, it's just always what I was told.
That is a true statement, and I will tell you why. My buddies that were Army nurses, because I'm a nurse by trade, but my buddies that were Army nurses said to me, yeah, so you're like condemned housing is like our officer housing. So you made a wise choice, Steve.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, and even deployed, later in life, I just got to see that. And so I walked into the Air Force recruiters, and I was like, hey, I know I just signed up for this particular job, but do you have a special operations career field? Like, I didn't notice that. And he said, yeah, but you wouldn't make it. And I was like,
well, that's really
a
nice.
low blow. Thanks for the confidence booster.
Yeah. And so he's like, 9 out of 10 dudes don't make it. It's a big, most people quit. It's just stick with what you got. And I was like, can you just give me the information and put what I just signed on hold? We're not going to do that. let me review this. So I looked up everything about it. There was a little disc, special operations disc, and it had 2 jobs in there: pararescue and combat control. And I didn't want to do anything with medicine. I was like, I don't want to touch. Like, I don't feel like dealing with that. I more just want to do commando stuff. So
Just want to wear the shorts, man.
Silkies.
So I looked at the combat control stuff, and I was like, I don't know about what that even means, or talking on radios, but what I don't want to do is mess with medicine. So I started training for combat control. And as I got into the delayed enlistment program and went to take that physical ability stamina test, the PASS test, to get into these special operations in the Air Force, they said, hey, which one are you taking? And I said, what do you mean? And they're like, well, which version of the test are you going to take? I said, what's the difference of the 2? And they said, well, one's got swimming at the beginning, one's got swimming after the run. And I said, well, I've always done run and then swim. And they're like, all right, cool, you're going to be a PJ.
Oh! Is that the one with medicine? Wait a minute.
I'd like to retract my last statement.
Okay, let me stop you there because that's hilarious. So for our audience here, and I know that there's also civilian medical people and probably just civilians listening. Let me just do a couple of things. One, I need to say that the military doesn't really care what you want. They're just going to take you and do what they want with you. I ended up in a similar situation on where I ended up in nursing. Irrelevant to this right now, but I get you. Number 2, I'm sure a lot of you guys are wondering, who the hell are we talking to? And we're just yapping away here. And, this podcast is geared towards military medicine. And if you'd notice over time, it's been really hard to nail down people in the military or veterans that have been in the military and medicine because they're all running around doing stuff. And so it's really hard to nail them down. But we grabbed one and we finally nailed him to a chair and we're like, come talk to us. And he said, okay, I will. And so who we have with us is Steve Nisbet. He's 16-year Air Force Special Warfare as a pararescueman, which is what he was just talking about. He's had 10 combat deployments, and then he was medically retired. And he had a diagnosis of PTSD that led to his retirement, which we're going to talk about. And now, at the end of all this, we're going to talk about where all this has led him in the civilian world. So, Steve, we did a little backwards. We were chatting with you first, but we want to welcome you on officially.
I love it. No, thank you for having me. Little Quentin Tarantino, I like it.
We stylish like that. So So go back to so go back to where I kind of cut you off there, where you ended up in the pararescue side of life.
Yeah, so he said, all right, you're going to be a PJ. And I was like, well, I thought I was going to sign up for combat control. And he said, well, they're the same thing. They go through the same training when you get there. And I was like, okay, this guy wouldn't lie to me.
Oh.
I'm cracking up so hard. How many times?
Got him.
Yeah. So I showed up to INDOC and looked around. There were no other combat control was separate than PJ's training, which before it used to be put together. They used to do the indoctrination course together, but then they separated. Mm-hmm. And the combat control schoolhouse went and did their own orientation. And PJ stuck with the indoctrination course. So as I entered into the pipeline, I started to discover kind of what it really was, paramedicine, and here I was. Now I'm all both feet in, so to speak, and just started pushing and dredging through it. So started my INDOC course with about 120 people, and of those, only 12 of us finished.
Wow.
How long is INDOC? Because this is a long process. The INDOC is how long?
So INDOC at that point was 12 weeks long. It's since changed to what's called assessment selection, and then they've taken they've brought everything back together again. And now when individuals sign up, they could sign up and then it is the same thing. They could become controllers and they could become PJs. It's really on the demand of the career fields at the time and how well they perform. And so what that guy said to me, back in 2004, 2005, is not a lie now. You know, you get to end up in the same place and then think you want to be a PJ and you can be a controller, and that's what's happening now. But that was 12 weeks for my particular. That's just the in-doc, like the gatekeeper school.
And that's all the physical stuff, right? I mean, you're not even doing medicine. You're just trying to like physically get through the challenges.
What year was this, Steve?
Right. This was 2005.
Okay. So, gosh, right. Okay. Just trying to get my timeline together.
Yeah. And so 12 weeks in the in-doc course, which is it's really a pre-scuba prep. So you're doing a lot of underwater stuff. You're doing a lot of water confidence training is what they call it.
Water confidence training. Yeah.
Buddy breathing with a snorkel, holding your breath quite a bit.
Drown proofing.
Drown proofing, yeah. So all the stuff that's underwater, all that water stuff that really starts to freak people out. So that's that first portion. Traditionally, you're supposed to go from there directly to dive school because you're going to be at your most prepared state. Well, there is a big backup for that time period for Special Forces dive school and Marine Corps dive school, which that's who we were sending our guys through. So PJs, like airports didn't have a dive school back then. So most of us ended up waiting. So in that time period of waiting, we go to airborne, we go to free fall, you go to SEER school, underwater egress. So I did all of those in a year time span. And then my dive school opened up. And meanwhile, as good as I was from that pre-dive, that in-doc portion, now you're going to dive school at those same standards that you finished at a year ago. And we know, like, going to airborne, going to free fall, going to all these different schools, and throughout a year, you're going to lose a lot of what you gained, at least, especially in the water. So the first classes of Air Force Dive School, they were trying to set precedent. So, hey, this is almost like another selection. So it was a kick. It was just as hard, if not harder, doing that than in-doc, because it was just smoke session after smoke session, all water stuff with a little bit of diving sprinkled in there. It's since changed, but they made a point to say, hey, this is Air Force Dive School, because it was on the same campus as the Navy Dive School there, so out in Panama City. So once you complete that, then you go to EMT Basic, EMT Paramedic, and then your final culmination school, which they typically called the Apprentice Course or PJ University. That's where you tie it all together, and then finally get your beret, which for me, I didn't fail anything. I didn't get kicked back anything. I didn't get recycled at all. It took 2.5 years.
2.5 years. Yeah, I was just going to say the in-doc itself, that first. So my husband actually, when he came in the military, I don't know if he did that, he actually came in as pararescue. And back then, he is a little before your time by probably 10 years. And I don't know if it was the same at your time or not, Steve, but if they got injured, I know that they recycle now, right? They'll get them healed up. I mean, they put a lot of money into you guys. You're like literally $1 million men and women. I mean, so he, it was a fall, blew his knee out, and they did the whole, I don't know if they still, I mean, this is what he is telling me. They turn their backs. You got to ring the bell. They turn their backs and you're done. I mean, it's very not nice. It sucks.
Yes. Yeah. So in-doc was very much like, usually people are quitting either on the pool deck or in the mornings before the day starts. In the morning, like most people.
Oh yeah, no, he was a year in. Like he was almost done. This was his, like, I don't remember exactly. Like he fell, something happened, but the way he landed, it blew his knee out. Like he couldn't continue on. And then, well, let me tell you that really sat with him for a long time. That was, yeah, not good. So I 2.5 years. I mean, you really are worth $1 million more after they've done all this training on you.
Yeah, especially now. Now they've invested a lot into the human performance aspect.
Yes.
Trained, and they have dietitians, they have physical therapists, they have masseuses, they have float tanks, cryo chambers. They've got the works, just building these combat athletes, so to speak, that are ready and built to go into combat. And so you see these, I still teach newer PJs that come out of the pipeline in tech rescue, and I just, with a group last week, and you just have these giants coming out of of the pipeline that are very well trained as far as physically, human performance wise. They they can move just about anything. They eat well, so it's pretty wild to see the amount of time and effort put into these folks.
What's happening to you mentally when this is happening? I mean, the whole thing is break you down and build you up, but I mean, and we all go through that on some level, but special forces is its own level.
Well, I would think too, seeing teammates, like you were explaining earlier, have to ring the bell. And I'd heard something about that in the past too. And it's almost like you're a quitter and there's a lot of negative feelings attached to that. So you're seeing that happen. You're physically feeling it, mentally feeling it.
Like what is it from your perspective that's going on in your head?
Yeah, so going through that whole entire process, it was a lot of discipline and focus on my goal. Like I never got focused or too attached to any one person because I never knew if they were going to get set back, if they were going to be, quit or whatever. There was a couple of us that were really close, but we had the same mindset of, I would say, quitting never crossed my mind. There was never a thought of, I'm going to quit. It was always, this sucks, or iteration is going to suck. And every step of the way, you would either break it down into seconds or segments or breaks, whether it's lunch, like, well, lunch is coming up, so we just got to survive till lunch. And then, dinner's coming up or breakfast, like, or if it's a really strong period of stress, let's say underwater, I'm going to get another breath. At some point, I'm going to come up and I'm going to get a breath. Whether I'm unconscious or conscious, that's a different story. I'm going to be, yeah. I'm going to get air. I'm going to get oxygen.
I will not die.
There's a defibrillator right over there. Good.
Yeah. and the other stuff said is you just look at I looked at the instructors as human beings. They all have families. They go home at night. They go to sleep. They have a schedule. They're going to go eat. Like, this is going to end at some point. I'm always thinking that at some point, like, even future, and deployments and things like that. Like, at some point, I'm going to be in my bed, like, or I'm going to be eating in the chow hall or whatever, wherever we're eating at night. So that's what I'm always thinking about if I approach a difficult or challenge, mentally. That I'm thinking about, okay, at some point, it's going to end.
So the medical part, right? So when we listen to this, it is a majority physical, right? I mean, there's a lot of, you have to get physically and then mental. The mental is probably more important than any part of this, because if you don't have that mental flexibility and resiliency, you're a goner. Like, you're not going to make it, right? So you had the right mindset of these little baby steps. But then we get into the medical part, and I kind of chuckle because I'm like, you're like, I don't want medicine. And here we are.
Pararescuemen, they end up being along the lines of like paramedics, right? If not greater.
What's your equivalency after you're done training?
Yeah, so you take the national registry to become a paramedic, and then you go beyond that to become, they have a lot of different qualifications and certifications you get. So advanced tactical practitioner is one. And then you would go to these 4 advanced schools to then get either a field surgery type of stuff. So whether we do surgical crike, so cutting a hole in somebody's neck, putting a tube in there. Used to be super taboo back in the day, or even a chest tube, putting a chest tubes in, or finger thoracotomy. So cutting holes in chests to drain out tubes. And now guys are getting, depending on the unit, guys are getting issued ultrasounds to put in main lines, cat lines, put a femoral line that goes down to the femoral artery to block that off in case we have a high junctional bleed and we can't access it. So we can do something, putting a wire down that's got a balloon at the end, inflate that, and at least give us some time to explore and then solve the problems at that end. Now, you don't have a lot of time, and it's a very advanced procedure that's watched, and you have to go through a lot of training, but that's something we do overseas with our surgeon team. you get a lot, but legally, like if I was to translate it to the States, I am legally a nationally registered paramedic.
Yeah.
Which even for a guy who says he didn't want to do medicine, paramedic school is very intense. I mean, we've got friends and have had coworkers that have gone through that program, and it's pretty arduous.
Yeah, so for us, it was condensed down into like a 3.5, 4 month period.
Holy crap.
And so you have pretty much a block. There's like 13 or 14 blocks that we were having to do. You're pretty much a block week. You got cardiology, pharmacology, and all these different sections of paramedicine that everything's being shoved down in your throat like a fire hose, and you're taking in as much information as you can, and then you pass that block, and then do it again, and then just do like dump that, and then go to the next, dump that, go to the next thing. So I wouldn't say you come out of there like a really good paramedic. Come out of there as a good student.
Yeah.
Then once you complete the national registry, the national registry, then you get to your teams, you do clinical rotations and things like that. That's when you start to really learn medicine. And then on your deployments, you start to learn, hey, what works and what doesn't.
That's where rubber meets the road on the deployment. But when you're doing your training, like in clinicals, are they putting you, I'm assuming, in trauma center type things? I mean, you're not in a family practice clinic, I'm assuming.
Right. So you go to a big hospital, and you'll have different rotations for different sections. So you get like 2 hours in labor and delivery. You get several hours in the ER. You'll get some time in the OR working, dropping tubes. So you just spend time with the anesthesiologist and put tubes in.
Okay, how many babies did you deliver?
That's a funny one. So on my first day, it was a C-section. So I labor and delivered my first day of clinicals and my last day of clinicals.
Nice.
So they're supposed to deliver a minimum of 2. That's the standard. So
bookend babies.
Section. What's that?
Bookend babies. One in the start, one at the end.
So I helped with the C-section on the first day, and then the last day I was like, all right, I'll just have to deliver 1, and I ended up helping to deliver 12 more.
Oh,
holy smokes!
I've had those days.
After 7 or 8, I had called up my preceptor. I was like, hey, I've already delivered like 7 babies today. Can I leave? Can I just be done? And they're like, well, you can go to the ER. I was like, I don't want to go to the ER.
I'll just stay.
I'll stay here.
I'm already in a rhythm.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just hang out here, and they ended up delivering 5 more. So.
Holy crap.
Yeah. That's not like I'm there by myself, but I'm intimately involved with the process.
Yeah. Yeah, and how beneficial was that in your future deployments?
Deployments, none. Personal life, very. I just recently had another baby.
Oh, congrats!
Not me and my wife, but there was a time period, and on the driving to the hospital, or even just in our house, I was like, well, I'm gonna have to deliver this one.
You're like, I got it.
Yeah, so she ended up going by ambulance. I got kicked out of the ambulance, and then met her there, and within 10 minutes of her arriving, 5 minutes of me arriving, she delivered.
Wow.
Yeah.
I call those stop, drop, and plops.
That's right. Yeah, they came quick.
I loved them because then there was very little paperwork.
Right.
Everybody breathing, we're doing good. Oh, that is awesome. All right, so you have done, all right, so you've gone through all this training, and it's extensive. I mean, we've been talking about it for a while, and I really want the audience to understand what our paramedics or pararescuemen are doing and the level of training that they get. It's high, and so when you're done that, because you have to handle anything that comes at you when you step into deployment. Anything goes, because your name in deployment, like every other PJ's name in deployment, stock, right? You're it. You're the man. So how long was it after your training got done that you went into the first of your 10 combat deployments?
It was actually 2 years. And so it was very frustrating because all my buddies were deploying and they were doing great things. And here I was like feel like a Ferrari that's never getting driven. And so when you finish, like, with anything, we finish in dock, and you feel like there's a moment where it's like an anticlimactic event. You finish something and you want it to feel a certain way, and it doesn't. Like, well, I have this other mountain to climb, and then you go and get your beret and become a full-fledged PJ, and then you show up to your first unit, and I'm like, well, that was anticlimactic. Like, I have this whole other mountain to climb, like deploying and actually doing the job. And then when you do that, then you have different levels of being a team leader, and then running a team, and becoming a jump master. So all these different things. It was like the itch was never being scratched, so to speak. So it was 2 years before I had deployed and actually done the job. Up until then, it was all training, preparing for whatever potential threat was coming up, nationally or globally, strategically type thing. I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan, with a special tactics squadron out there. My deployment first one was in 2010, and it was with a joint task force. So I was out in eastern Afghanistan, and on the third day being there was a pretty big base attack, and that was the first time I got shot at and figured out, like, oh, that's what bullets sound like going by you. And then from then on, it was kind of deployments and essentially what I call the black cloud of doom of things just occurring throughout my career, of just, whether it's me being in the right place at the right time, or, just black cloud of bad things going on around me.
And that's what we call experience.
Yeah, I got my fair share of it. I then scratched all the itches.
And then some. You're just like, okay, that's great. The wound's bleeding now.
That's right. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that's it. Go for it.
So, how many deployments? I'm going to kind of move you through these deployments. You were deployed during what operations?
Several. So obviously Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, and then individually when I moved to Joint Task Force, when I moved to our Tier 1 unit, those were very individual operations that were very, they weren't theater campaigns. They were like, hey, this is a particular operation that is specific for this particular force, right? So more of a classified type of operation to do those particular deployments. And then you have Inherent Resolve, which is another campaign.
Right. Yep.
So spread throughout all the theaters. So Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, East Africa, even Lebanon. So I've gotten a taste of just about every terrorist organization on the planet. And yeah, I've gotten a fair share of pretty much every AO that you could possibly get involved
with some secret squirrel stuff sprinkled in between.
A lot of non-disclosure stuff going on there that you'll never know. Well, when we say that, we're like, ooh, you signed an NDA and it's all secret squirrel. The downside of that, and Steve, you probably will relate to this, is that when you sign the non-disclosure, then what other things that occur are things like your records get data masked, right? Nobody can see it because it's all secret squirrel, depending on obviously the non-disclosure and whatnot, but in the classification, but it's all secret squirrel stuff. And the reason why I'm kind of bringing this up is because I would take care of a lot of special forces guys, and what I would see happen is that they couldn't, especially when they were leaving the military, they couldn't get the care they needed. They couldn't get the VA to support it, whatever. Like, oh, well, it's data mask. We have no proof. And that's a huge issue.
Yeah. How are you supposed to process any kind of trauma or, whatever it is you're dealing with when you've got those cards stacked against you with the data masking, and you can't, go into detail.
Yeah, how do you
What
talk to a
happened? Like, how do you
therapist?
work through that? Do you just hypothetical the crap out of it? Like, hypothetically, not that this ever happened, but how do you get around that?
So the nice thing about is while you're there, right, you're at this special mission unit, is they have embedded psychologists,
Yes.
embedded therapists that are there that understand the mission. They've got all the credentialing that you could possibly need for security clearances. So that's no problem. It's that like when you describe the transition out, and when we do our short notice missions, or you get a phone call and within an hour you're on an airplane out somewhere else. It's not like somebody is generating these orders for you and like, here you go, like here's where you're going to go, here's what you're going to do, and you don't have like a deployment line that you're going through. You're getting your stuff in an ICU. This is what I need. I don't know how long to be gone. Get on an airplane. That stuff gets loaded, and then you fly. And you start mission planning en route. We have like a blanket set of orders, and so it's just a general statement saying this person from these dates to these dates is on this alert cycle. Now it's when you're transitioning out and you go to do your VA appointments, and the VA starts contracting out other hospitals and organizations and clinics, and they have no clue, the DoD or the military in general, but even more so a special mission unit, let alone just special operations itself. So when you describe some of the things that, hey, I've got a TBI from doing snow and ice movement or skiing. That's how we get around in the snow. And I fell and went unconscious. And the response from the clinician was, well, you don't ski. Skiing's for fun. It's not for the military, so we're not going to count that. And I was like, excuse me? Like, how do you expect us to get around in the snow just because we're fighting a war in what you see in the desert? Like, there's snow in a lot of places that we have conflicts in. So you have to make friends, I guess, like build relationships, help them understand. That was the challenge, is you're treated in this, for me in particular, and for folks like me in the special mission unit, is you're treated this, you have a standard of care, and you're used to somebody like taking care of everything for you. I started transitioning out. It was, hey, the transition assistance programs over there, you got to go to base finance, you got to go to base, like all these different people, and they're like, yeah, we don't have any of your medical records, we don't have any of your stuff. It shows you haven't deployed since 2013 with your other unit. I'm like, okay, so you have to go through fixing your DD-214. You got to go through like all the things that a traditional person in the military would have done for them already. It's already in the system, and we just work on a different system. Likewise with promotions. Promotions were a challenge for us because at that unit, everything you do is a data mass operation. It's a special mission. It's a special assignment, and so you can't write your enlisted performance report the way that other people would. And so, like, I can't describe this particular operation with who I was supporting, how many people I treated, like the location I was at for how long. I can't describe any of that. Yet it was a pretty valorous thing. Then that sets me back a peg or two against these other folks who didn't have a deployment, but they had an opportunity to go to school. So they got themselves a degree. They went and volunteered at different places. They trained up some newer guys on teams, so they were able to progress themselves in their career. So you have these guys who physically in the job didn't make themselves better because they didn't execute the job, but they got the promotion, versus folks like myself who were doing the job for 8 months, potentially deployed. We get like, maybe next year.
So they've got the tangible bullets, the things that could be talked about to write on the EPR. And what I'm hearing you too say is there's challenges even before leaving services. You're kind of doing this uphill battle with promotions, with EPRs. And it's great that you had embedded psychologist there to treat the mental health side. But it brought to my head the question of, what about when you're out, when that uniform comes off?
Yeah, hold that thought right there, because I'm going to back you up just a little bit and bring you back to that. When was it in deployment time that you realize, not necessarily deployment, but in your military career, when you're like, okay, this isn't working anymore? And MZ and I actually were talking about this just before you came on, that we used to take care of lots of Guard and Reserve people in our previous job. And when we were in the military, and I took care of a lot of special forces guys. And that comment I made was, when I got a special forces guy, I pretty much can guarantee you they're going to be medically boarded. And the reason for that was because they were trying to get it done for so long that by the time they reach me, they're broke. They're broke as a joke. I mean, they've really given absolutely everything they can, and now they can't. So where was it in your continuum that things started changing for you? And I'm not asking you to get in any detail you're not comfortable with, but just where along that, where you're like, yeah, this not so good anymore.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, my second deployment was with the rescue squadron. It wasn't a joint task force. I was doing what overseas typically you would refer to as a CASEVAC mission, flying, call sign Pedro in a 60, when we go pick up, anywhere from, somebody fell off a HESCO barrier or like got like a scorpion sting, to mass casualties, 8, 9, or unknown amount of patients. So it was ups and downs, and we were flying 6 to 7 missions a day.
On a helo? You were on a 60, you said? On a helo?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so for 4 months straight, minimum, every single day, you knew I had at sunrise, and we're all working 12-hour shifts. So, my shift would be between like 2 in the morning to 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And always like right at sunrise, I knew that's when the calls were going to start coming in. And so we would train, we'd show up, maybe watch some Game of Thrones in the morning, and go do a training session as far as working out, and then rope work or extrication, whatever it is. And then as soon as the sun starts rising, like 30 minutes before, is when I make the guys like, hey, we're just going to sit and wait for this missions, because it's going to be nonstop after that. So as I got used to that routine, turning the adrenaline up, turning it down, turning it up and down, up and down. Came back home, then deployed again almost within 3 months after getting home.
Oh, goodness.
And that was a lot by choice, really, because I had a new group of guys that were coming in. They needed somebody to deploy. I had just gotten back, and I was like, hey, I'm willing to go. So after those deployments were closing down for rescue, that's when I went over to the special mission, because there was a whole other selection process, a whole other training course. That was, 15 of us started, 6 of us were picked up, and then it was a year of training just to get to that level, that tier level. And then deployed several times after that. And it was the symptoms I started to notice after 7 years of doing that. It was memory loss. Like, I couldn't remember some of the folks that I had known for a decade. I couldn't remember like the name of somebody that was talking to me, how long was talking to me. Or I recognized somebody at Walmart, and I didn't want to say hello because I couldn't remember his name. And then just a lot of like being spacey. I would, it's not like I'm thinking about anything really. I'm staring at, it's either empty space or pushing my daughter on a swing, or just wherever at the playground. I'm just sitting and I'm just staring at nothing. I have nothing going on. My brain's just turned off. And then the irritability. So I get very irritated really quickly. It was, for me, coming back from a deployment, typically I want like 2 weeks to not go anywhere or like go to dinner. I don't want to go out to a restaurant because I'm going to come across some ungrateful people that don't appreciate what they have, and I'm going to flip out. So I really want to just sit at home and kind of be a catch-22, so to speak, because I'm not used to the kids either. And the kids being so young at that time, and they would get loud, and they would whine and fight, and I didn't know how to deal with that. And I would rather get shot at than deal with the kids.
Who was noticing the symptoms first, you or your wife?
My wife.
And I say that with intention because we know that that's typically, I would get a lot of those phone calls. My wife said, my husband said, my partner said, yeah, before they recognized it. So,
Yeah, and she was really good about it. Would usually lead into an argument, right? So, like, you're being too hard on the kids, this, that. My dad had spent 30 years in law enforcement and worked in gangs, and I was emulating how he was with us as kids. And it's not that he was bad or anything like that, but it was aggressive, it was stern, and it was loud when it needed to be. And so that's what I emulated, and that was what came really easy to me to get the reaction that I wanted, which was them to stop screaming, to stop fighting, and then just to be quiet. And so as that, and every time I did, and it was essentially intimidating them, every time I got the reaction I wanted, I was looking for, I felt like a piece of garbage. I'd go sit down and like, hey, what's wrong with you? And one day, Ian might sitting there thinking about that particular, having that particular emotion. My wife had sat down and she pretty much capitalized on that moment and said, like, hey, I don't want to make you upset, and I love you, but you're scaring the kids. And Merkin and Carter, my kids, they're scared of you. That hit me really hard. And so I was like, okay, well, you're right. Like, I should not be doing that. I should not be being loud. I'm supposed to be the one that's protecting them, not making them afraid. And so that's when I started emailing the psychologist, like, hey, what do people even come and talk to you about? Like, I don't even know the first step. I don't know what to tell you. I don't, all I know is PTSD from the movies.
right.
And that's not me. Like, I don't wake up in the middle of the night, like having some sort of meltdown or like no spatial awareness. Like, I wake up fine. I feel like I'm normal. And so I sat with the psychologist, and she poked and prodded as resistant as I was. And one of the biggest things was my memory loss, which was concerning to me because I had a lot of TBIs or micro TBIs to go with it. And so I was like, I want to get an MRI and I want cognitive testing. So I did MRI, and they're like, yeah, your brain, like, physically is fine. Like, there's maybe a little bit of scarring tissue here and there, but it's for the most part fine compared to what we've seen. And in the cognitive testing, you performed really well. You're superior above all these other people except for one area, and that's attentiveness. Like, you cannot maintain attention to anything longer than like a minute or two, and you did horrible there, which is strongly indicative of PTSD of some sort. And we got to explore that. And I was like, I don't feel like I have that, but okay. So I went back to the psychologist and started just being open. And as I started describing or answering some of the questions, for example, what I can consider just a recurring dream, she calls it a nightmare. And she's like, well, what's the dream? And I still have it to this day, but somebody's coming after me, and I pull out a gun, I'm trying to shoot them, and I'm squeezing the trigger, but it just keeps going, and then there's just no bang, and it gets to the end, and there's nothing, like nothing happens. And it happens 6 nights a week. It just changes the theme of the dream changes. She's like, well, that's a nightmare, and then I got headaches and irritability, anxiety, depression, but the way that I was trained and all my training, I just continue to push and work through it. I'm always thinking about the next step, and I don't sit back and acknowledge what's happening around me. So that was a step of like, okay, well, I'm going to start working these things. And the other thing was that I stopped enjoying what I was doing. Even though I was deploying, jumping out of planes, and doing things people pay money for. I didn't enjoy it. Like I would wake up dreading, I'm gonna go jumping today, and I just like all I want to do is sit and do nothing. But I would go out and make sure that I outperformed the guys below me, or at least perform just as good as they were, just so because I was their leader. So
you bring it. You said this a couple times, and it caught me. You bring an interesting duality to how we are in the military. So we're all trained as team, right? We've got to be a team. And we know that the success of the team is our success, right? That's how we're trained. Complete the mission, right? You need the team to do it. But the duality of it is that we are also taught to be fiercely independent. And the more subcultured you get, right, the more you see this fierce independence, like moving forward. And I got to be there for my guys. The guys in your head, they don't have to be there for you. You got to be there for them, So all this push forward and this intensity, and we're notorious for just looking ahead, not in the rear view. We can't control what's already happened. We can only control the now and getting to our goals. That's what we're always doing. And so you see this happening, this whole culture built, and then people are like, how come they don't get intervention earlier? Like, well, gee, let's talk about that. Why do you think? Because we're busy taking care of our people. We're busy figuring out getting it done. We're busy trying to complete a mission and make sure everybody's safe. We are constantly focused on everything but ourselves. And I don't know how many times I've heard that same, like I had a gentleman one time that this is kind of warply humorous. The gentleman needed to have some kind of special therapy. We brought him up to it was a VA in Minnesota or somewhere. And I get a call and they're like, so Mr. So-and-so is like failing the training. I'm like, failing? What does that mean? It's like a 60? I mean, is this a pass or fail? I don't understand what you mean. And so he had a TBI, and that's what they were doing this training, all the therapy and whatnot. But what they said was, we're pretty positive he has PTSD, and that is interfering with what we're doing. And
is this your Spider-Man guy?
No, this was a farmer.
Oh.
Yeah. And he was really mad at them because what he was hearing from them was, you're crazy. And that's not what they were trying to tell him. They're trying to tell him that the PTSD is interfering, right? Well, anyways, long story short, he ends up coming home, and I get on the phone with him, and I have a good rapport. I was a farm girl, so I kind of got country, and we talked farm and stuff. And through our conversation, it finally came out, and he actually broke down and cried. He had been having nightmares every single night for I don't know how many years. And he never related this as an issue. He was so focused on taking care of his guys, and when he was deploying and what needed to be done and all this stuff, he never once connected that his issues, he just thought it was all TBI stuff. And that's what he had cognitive delays and whatnot. And he thought it was all related to that. And I had to explain the whole concept of the brain protecting itself and the skills that we're taught, when we say, oh, you have PTS or PTSD, and you have all these symptoms. Well, those were survival techniques where we lived in deployment, right? Those symptoms were what's keeping us alive, right? And so trying to explain that all to him, but for years he suffered because he did not understand that he had PTSD and the nightmares and whatnot. And even you said it, you're like, I was just having a dream. Like, well, yeah, but somebody coming out to take you out. I don't know, Steve. I'm thinking That's not one of those fairy tale dreams I want to have.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And a lot of guys, they don't want to if there's it's a double-edged sword where you
Yeah.
say, hey, I've got a problem. Oh, you got a problem? All right, you're going to go ahead and not deploy anymore. You're going to ride a desk for the rest of your career.
That's the consequence that nobody wants to face. I mean, when I was a flight nurse, we wouldn't even take,
The NIF.
yeah, the word DNF was like a 4-letter word to us. Like, oh no, 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 we're going to fly it all. I mean, I watched my friend's eardrum rupture and he was smiling, his blood's coming out of him. He's like, oh, it feels so much better. I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
Not
it's
grounding
not,
that ass.
not
Nope.
going to be in a minute. Yeah. So that we are going to keep the mission going at any cost.
Right, exactly. So I would venture to say a large, majority of your special operators out there who have gotten many deployments, they have something going on, and they're just not going to say something because what are they going to do? Set them down and then now they're not deployable. They're not going to do their job anymore. So that's a terrifying thing. Just even for law enforcement and firefighters, it's the same thing.
Right.
They do terrible things or see terrible things, and then and they're gonna, hey, you all right? Yep, I'm good. Because the consequence of them saying they're not good is they don't get to do their job anymore, and they don't get to do the one thing that they love. And when they do, if they're not ready for that moment where they have to sit down and accept that is no longer their life, then that's when they start turning down a dark path of depression, drinking even heavier than they already were, because most of our folks are heavy drinkers to begin with, those mechanisms, and then that's when the transitioning veteran or the service member, that's when they start looking at taking their own life, because who are they if they aren't this operator, or if they're not who they've been their entire adult life? I've spent my entire adult life as a PJ. I didn't know anything different, and now I'm on my way out. I didn't know what to do, So, and I fortunately had a year to figure that out. Some folks don't get that, and they're just, hey, by the way, you're transitioning out. Figure it out.
That transition, when you said you had a year, is because you were going through a medical board, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, MZ and I have watched this. We have a lot of familiarity with med boards. And what I noticed when I first started in that, as she's a recipient herself, that I saw this, and it was worse for the Guard and Reserve, because let's say you were a cop, a SP in the military, and you were also one in the civilian sector. If there was an injury in the military side that made you non-retainable, there's a high chance that same thing was going to prevent you from continuing your civilian job as a cop. And so in one felt swoop, their entire identity was gone, or leaving, or at risk, or whatever. And I would watch this grieving process happen. I mean, I could almost, like, sometimes I wish I had like a checkbox and be like, anger, check, bargaining, check. Yeah. I mean, they would call me, and I mean, God, I've heard it all, and they just, they'd go off and they'd be mad. And then eventually, and everybody had a different time frame, then there would be that kind of submission, that acceptance. I'm not saying they liked it. I'm just saying that it was almost more like defeat. And then I would hear things like, well, fine, if the military's going to take this from me, I'm going to take everything I can from them. And I would get so mad at our leadership across the board, because they would translate this. And when I say leadership, I mean like commanders, supervisors, whoever it is we were talking to, wing commanders, anybody. And they would translate this into them trying to milk a system.
Them being a problem child.
Yeah. And they're problem child, and they're trying to, and I'm like, okay, hold on. And so I'd have to reframe this perspective to them, listen, and have had situations where that commander that was giving them shit, next thing I know, a year later, is calling me very sheepishly, because now they're in a situation and they're at risk in being medically boarded or whatever's going on with them, and I held all of them in the same grace, but there was that snarky ass side of me that was like, there you go, motherfucker. How you liking it now? Like now all of a sudden you understand it, but you couldn't when it wasn't you.
Right.
Yeah. So
yeah, there's a it's telling of a leader what kind of leader they are when they have pressure pushed above them or pushing on them. We had individuals after everything happened with me and I started my medical board process. 30 other operators, 35 other operators, medically retired at the same time. And so now we had more operators retiring out of this one squadron than AFSOC as a whole. And the question was like,
why?
Like, why? Like, you can't. And then the mandate was you can't let anybody else medically retire out of there. And it's like you can't make that happen. Like
there's retention standards. You either meet it or you don't. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing was you had leaders at the AFSOC commander level saying, hey, this is what's going to happen, and getting involved in things at the tactical level that they shouldn't be. And so that was the problem, was now you had other commanders being pressured by their leadership saying, like, well, you can't medically retire anybody else out of here. You just say some magic words like, you can't make that happen. You can't deny somebody care that they need. So there was a lot of disgruntled thugs that came out of that particular unit after our medical retirement process, or the exodus, the mass exodus, so to speak.
When you were, I'm going to go backwards a little bit again, deploying, you made a comment. The one thing that they love to do is the one thing that's breaking them, right? And I resonate with that loudly, and I'm sure MC you relate to that too. What was it during your career when you were, again, we don't need weedy details, and I don't want to put you feeling uncomfortable, but what was your best win and your biggest challenge when you were a paramedic and a PJ, when you're more than a paramedic. You got to do a little of everything. When you were deploying, what were the big wins or the big good and the big challenges at the same time?
Let me write down one thing I might forget.
Don't forget.
I'll try to answer that.
When you were saying memory and you were listing stuff, I'm like, I gotta go talk to a psychologist. So like, I call it mommy brain,
goldfish brain, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
Forever writing lists over here.
I just want to remember this particular thing, the challenges. I'll go into a tangent. The wins, what I enjoyed. So I wouldn't have gone to the special mission unit if the deployments that I was doing were still there. Like if we were still doing CASEVAC and they didn't shut it down for the Pedro or an Angel weapon system, so to speak.
Yeah.
If they didn't shut those down, I would have kept doing that. I really enjoyed that. And what I enjoyed was the problem solving and the quick. I had a few crisis action mission planning. We get a scramble call, and so radio call on the net. You go to the operations center. Most of the team goes over to the helicopter, starts getting their kit on, starts prepping whatever it is that I've told them to prep. And we have 5 minutes to receive the information, and then 5 minutes to get off the ground. So 10 minutes total. So while we're putting kit on, getting our guns and everything, and we're getting grid coordinates, we're getting how many patients there are, what caused the event, what their condition is now. So a 9-line of all of that. And so I get to think in my head, how is this going to go? Who am I going to put in? Where are the patients going to go? And what's the threat? What's our threat level? So I really enjoyed that excitement, that thinking, and down south was a lot different. In southern Afghanistan was a lot different than northern Afghanistan because we're in the 60s, 60s can only carry so much weight at so much altitude, and, with weather or at least temperature outside. So we had a mine, a couple guys step on a mine up really high up in the mountains. Well, there's only enough weight allotted for one PJ and one med rock to go up and pick up one person per aircraft. So that means we had to take everything off the aircraft, and I had to select who was going to go and who was going to go execute this body recovery, along with down south. We had a mass casualty. Who was going to land? Where were the patients going to go? Am I going to shuttle patients in and out of here? And on one particular mission where that helo was getting shot so much that I was putting that helo at such a grave risk that thing could get shot down. And if that gets shot down on their next rotation out of here, then we're in another world of trouble. And so luckily it didn't. That particular helo got pretty much had to get sent back home because I'd been shot so many times, and nobody else on the team was shot, which is a miracle in itself. So those are that was my favorite time period was working as a leader and problem solving. And there's just a lot of different scenarios in there where, from resupplying troops that were out in an area that nobody else could get to because of weather conditions, and our helos were one of the few that could fly still, to getting a patient off of a really high outpost. And this particular individual, we picked them up, and they didn't have medical tools there. And so when we pulled this guy off and started looking at the treatment that was done, there was chicken feathers everywhere. And I couldn't understand why there was feathers all over this dude and the aircraft. And as we started evaluating his injuries, he had gotten shot under his armpits, and it went through and through. And so one of the guys pulled off a chicken wing and looked at it, and there was skin. So they had taken the chicken and cut its wings off and the skin from its wings and used it as an inclusive dressing.
Oh my God.
And they plugged the holes on both sides. Listen, so we pulled off and cleaned off his wound, gave him some antibiotics, started a line, and then needle darted him. And once we got him to the FST, which is about an 8-minute flight, got him in there, double chest tube or bilateral chest tube, and then he ended up surviving. Pretty wild to see, and try to fathom where these people's mindsets were when they were getting overrun by the Taliban up there.
Yeah.
Quick, get a chicken.
I know. Did he have a taste for chicken after?
Chicken man.
That's the other thing is also food. We pick up individuals after IEDs and helicopter crashes, and so they're all burnt up. And you go back, and we can't go to the chow hall. We have our food brought to us.
Oh, this is why you guys are such a pain in the ass to deal with when you're not in your bubble. I'm just going to point that out. But I love you anyway.
Well, they're brought to us in a giant green tub called mermites. And the other, number one, we'd open it up, and then the only thing that was left was barbecue ribs or chicken. And I was I'm good.
No chicken today.
Eating those. It looked like the patient that I just had.
I'll pass.
Yeah. I'll rather eat cereal or milk. I'm just doing it.
Where's the MREs?
Yeah, exactly. So that was a challenge. Was going through that, but I would say the challenges I faced the most. I don't call them losses, but what frustrated me the most was leadership. So I was a leader fighting to do the things I needed to do, and then you had individuals who were thinking that they're being a leader, but they're not. They have no clue where they're at.
Yeah.
So when we're landing from that particular mission. It was a mass casualty, 8 or 9 patients in this house for IED, and just shuttling them off back and forth, and the helicopters covered in blood and bullet holes. And we're just sitting there. Luckily, we survived this one. And so with my helmet strapped above me, and I'm just sitting back, our shift had ended. And so I was I can't wait to go back and go to bed. We're going to clean out the silo. and it's going to get packed up and sent back to the States because they have nothing to fix or fly it. And the first thing that this officer comes over and tells me, he's like, "Hey, you guys okay?" "Yep." "Okay. This Colonel so-and-so, he said that you guys need to wear your helmets when you're flying in. Everywhere you go, you need to wear your helmet, and you need to make sure you shave in the morning."
Oh my God.
Tell
Fucking
Colonel
officers.
so-and-so to kiss my grits.
Yeah. I was like, "This guy said it?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Thanks for telling me. I'm going to go kill him." And he was like, "What?" And I was
You fucking
Probably
heard me.
serious too.
yeah, I was dead serious. I was going to strangle him. I was going to go choke him until he died. Just because that was the most inappropriate, inopportune time to tell me something like that. Also, I don't care about that. This guy, how about this guy come over here and clean out the blood out of the aircraft? Why don't you come and see all the bullet holes?
That's what I would have said. I've been like, hey, no problem. Like, I will go shave, but he can just come over here and clean up this mess in here.
Worried
No
about
problem.
2903 while you've got all that shit going on. Ridiculous.
Yeah, and it was that kind of, those types of interactions where we also had in that operations center, it's easy for these folks in that area to get celebratory and to feel like they're a part of things and and forget where they're at. And so it's all kind of just like a game to them, and they don't see what we see. And that's not a fault of their own, but it was a very frustrating experience when coming back from a mission, we got word that there's another mission, and I said, "We'll just send that 9 line over radio. We'll go pick it up on our way back." And they didn't, and so I assumed it wasn't a very critical mission or anything like that. Like the patient wasn't dying,
right?
And then when we landed, dropped our first patient off, refueled, landed, and pick up the 9 line, which about 12 minutes transpired between that time period. And this guy hands me a piece of paper and look at it, and it's a cat-out book, meaning just immediate critical casualty, bilateral amputation, lower leg amputation from a dismounted patrol IED.
Yep.
And I'm like immediately fuming. Like, I can't believe they didn't send this over the radio. We could have been there 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And that's the difference of life and death right there. So immediately hopped in the aircraft and told him, "Hey, let's spike blood. Let's get ready to throw blood at this dude and do everything we can for this guy." Picked him up, and his buddies were pretty much all like giving him a hug and kissing him on the forehead because they assumed he wasn't making it. And I had to push them off of him because the hospital was literally 4 minutes away. And I was like, "I can get him to the hospital. We can get him in surgery right now.
Get off. Yeah.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but get out of here." So we spike blood, get blood on him, give him some ketamine, check the tourniquets, get him into the hospital. And I get really frustrated because there's a doctor outside that stops him, and he's like talking to him, asking him his pain levels.
Just fucking get him in there, man.
No legs. What do you think?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's exactly what I said. It's like, he doesn't have freaking legs. And he's reaching in his pockets. I was like, "What are you looking for?" He's like, "In case he's got grenades." I was like, first, I don't care if he has a freaking 120 round strapped to his back. He's an American soldier. He's not bringing in a grenade like an insurgent would, like a Taliban agent.
Right.
Second, like, he's about to die. Get him in the goddamn OR immediately. So I was fuming at this doc. And it just, like, that's the way he was trained.
Right.
And not understanding the gravity of the situation. So that right there was just like, this guy doesn't know where he's at.
That training is like that response training. We did our little like field day training out in the, your annual training, which was, I know you're all laughing at right now, Steve, but we'd go out there and play hospital out in the field and all that. He's smirking. I can see him smirking right now. And so anyways, I actually most of mine was actually obstetrics, not by choice, whole other story, but I did lots of labor and delivery. And we go out and have OB doc with me, and he's newer, and he comes up to me, he goes, okay, like, how's this go down? And I was like, it's called mass casualty. Like, everything you learn, flip it. He's like, what? And I'm like, if they take the most resources, they're the least chance to get it. And so I'm going through triage with him, and his face, he was just like jaw dropped. And he's like, God, we're not trained this way. I'm like, that's why we do this training. And it was very prevalent when COVID hit. I actually had a friend of mine that was a health administrator call me and said, hey, our docs are struggling because now they had to start triaging like mass cal, right? It's like a whole different way of thinking. And they were struggling. They're like, we can't do that. We can't do it that way. And they're like, yeah, you better be ready because we might have to do it that way. And so, and the whole point of it is just that training, right? Just you knew you were there. And if you hadn't experienced ER trauma doc, he would have been like, listening to you, and probably might have been patting him down as you're running in, but not probably saying as much as assessing him to get him on the table to get things going, right?
So you're saying there's a difference between the plastics and derm guys than the...
A little.
Okay.
A little. I'm
Yeah.
sure Steve notices the difference a little.
Oh, and that, I mean, and there are all these different things that could have led to this guy
Yeah.
passing away, because even getting him off of the helicopter and onto an ambulance, which is a 400-meter distance, they were trying to put him on a rickshaw, so that had wheels.
Just carry him.
Yeah, this guy's on a Israeli litter. Just pick him up and carry him over there, because you guys can't figure out how to secure him onto there. Like, so we just picked him up and carried him over there, because get these people away.
Yeah.
So used to having one certain way, you can't problem solve it. This is, even though this is what you typically do, and things are going wrong. Like, we don't have time to deal with you having to figure out this problem. We're going to go over here. So after experiencing that and then coming back, we would hop in the helicopter would go refuel. We'd hop in a box truck and drive back over to our place of business, or our HR, whatever you want to call it. And I was just pretty fuming. I was pretty upset in the truck. And I walked into the intel, into the operations center, and kicked in the door and made it swing open and smash open. So it was really loud, so everyone turned around, so I already had their attention. And they're like, well, that was a good mission, right? And I was like, no. And they're like, well, he's going to live. I was like, I hope so. Here's the problem. Like, you guys all in here in your air conditioning, you think it's all good and fun. You're all part of a game, and like, you want to feel like you're part of things, running a piece of paper out to our aircraft. I was like, that guy, I don't know if he's going to live or not. And we wasted over 15 minutes because you guys didn't want to relay a message over the radio. Like, if this guy dies, you guys are a contributing factor because of whatever game you're trying to play in here. I had a lot to say, and obviously everybody in there got emotional and they were crying. I was very upset, and I walked out of there and walked straight over to the commander, and I was like, hey, just so you know, I flipped out on the operations center folks, all the intel folks, pretty much anybody involved in this, and they're probably going to recommend you send me home, just so you know, just so you're not blindsided by this.
Yeah.
And so he's like, okay. And I was like, what are you going to do, sir? And he's like, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to follow up your anger with more anger.
Yes.
That's a good commander.
There we go.
So he backed me up, and I think they received the message of, like, you guys understand what your role is, and we're here to help people, not to be a part of things or.
That requires critical thinking.
There's a lot of self-cheering in that staffer world. And I mean, I know, MZ, you've seen it. And there's a lot of like, look at us, we're so awesome, and setting things up for their success. And well, MZ, you know, I never subscribed to that thinking, which caused a lot of problems. But it is, I'm like, how in God's name do you not see what the hell's going on. I mean, if you're getting a report in a 9-liner and saying a double amputee,
Let me take it out after my tea.
right, like minutes, seconds, like there's just everything drops, right? Like, yeah,
Right.
I get it. And maybe it's just because I'm a nurse, I don't know, but I mean, like,
You
what,
value the preservation of human life, and that's exactly what
preferably,
we're here to do.
yeah, it is that different mentality. So, okay, so we're like totally busting the hour, but I think the conversation's like really good, and I want to put this forward now. Okay, so you did all that, and you rocked it out pretty hardcore, and then you did have your year, and then you got out. Kind of briefly tell me, like, did you crash and burn, or did you rise like the phoenix? I mean, I know eventually you rose like the phoenix because I know where you're at, but what was happening when you stepped out the door?
So yeah, so the ultimately what led to the pathway out was a training accident that I was a part of. I was a team leader of a group of guys at that special mission unit, and we went out and did some rock climbing out in Boise, Idaho. And one of the anchors that was placed um, on a 70-foot cliff for a single pitch climb, as guys were rappelling off, that anchor failed.
Oof.
And one guy, he was rappelling, got about halfway down. The anchor failed. He fell about 30 feet. Another one of our guys was attached to the anchor itself. And so the weight of that guy that was on the rope pulled the other one off. So he fell full 70 feet or so. So me and the guys that were there, we treated Peter and did our best, but ultimately ended up passing away that accident. So that kind of was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. I lost a lot of teammates and treated a lot of folks over the years, but this one was very different to me. It was at the end of my career. I was already seeing a psychologist, and he had a young son at the time, and his wife was pregnant with their daughter.
Yeah.
Talking about where we were going to go to dinner that night. I mean, it was supposed to be a morale building, team building trip to EY. And now one of us is not coming home, and I was the team leader. So I obviously took in a lot of responsibility and feeling very responsible for it, and pulled myself up a team, utilized the resources of the unit, specifically psychologists, neuropsychologists, physical therapists, strength conditioning, like everything that we had to try to reset myself, and came back onto the team. Did a short notice deployment, contingency operation, went out, did our mission, came back. And this was April of 2020, and we're getting ready to deploy again in May. So prepping for where I was about to deploy to for our real deployment, our 4-monther, and then get a call that the investigation is closed out for his accident. As naturally, there's always an accident safety investigation. And what they came up was like, hey, there's nothing that we could have done to prevent what happened, nothing we could have done to change the outcome, but somebody needs to be held accountable, and it's going to be the team leader. And so with that, I was removed from my position at that unit. I was removed from the unit itself, and I was given 30 days pretty much to PCS. I was told to come in on a weekend so that the rest of the team didn't see me unpack my gear, and I wasn't allowed to go to the unit at all. So that was a really heavy hit that just drove me into a pathway of depression. And the unit that they were going to send me to was back to my unit I came from, which is Vegas. And I just knew the negative influences that were there waiting, right? So I was like, I can't go there and really destroy my family. I'm going to have to, I'm in a position where I got nothing left to offer. So I chose the medical retirement route with the PTSD diagnosis, worked with psychologists to pursue that option, and ultimately got that. So my year process out, I was thinking like, well, what am I going to do now? And so I had some internships, and I knew I wanted to be in the human performance space. I wanted to have a gym. I wanted to have like a flow tanks, like a recovery center kind of thing, for physical performance. I wanted to be geared towards veterans and law enforcement, firefighters, and had the opportunity to intern for a guy at Exos. Exos is a pro performance gym, right?
Mm-hmm.
You guys are familiar with?
Exos is awesome.
Yeah, so I interned with them, and ultimately I was like, "Hey, Alex, is there going to be a job after this?" And he was like, "Well, I mean, no, there's not."
Sorry.
And I was like, "Alex, what am I going to do?" He's like, "You need to start doing what you said you're going to be, and like believe in yourself the way I believe in you." Yeah, so he was really a strong mentor to help me start the nonprofit Shields and Stripes, and didn't know what I wanted out of it. And so having his guidance and his connections to say, "Hey, ask Exos, can we use your facilities to bring veterans and first responders into Exos performance facilities and treat them like either a professional athlete or a special operator, but not addressing just the physical aspects, but bringing in mental health clinicians and doing the physical and the mental health portion." So we bring in 8 veterans and first responders at a time. It's a 3-month total program. 3 weeks of it is at Exos. 9 weeks is telehealth. We've partnered with Exos, obviously. We've partnered with Therabody and several other organizations that help fund an individual to go through the program. So it's completely free for them. They would get the strength conditioning program. They're to get a dietitian consult, food made for them, specifically for them, physical therapy. They get occupational therapy, and then their mental health psychotherapy, both individual and group settings. And then they have massage and other modalities of recovery in there with us: cold plunge, hot plunge, saunas, things like that. And so we've been doing that for 2 years now. Started that in April of 2021, and executed our first cohort in August of 2021. And now we're on our 6th cohort, which hopefully we can start in March.
That is awesome. That is.
Yeah.
And so for the audience, if you don't know, when we say Exos and we're all over here like, yeah, it's real cool and stuff. Actually, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, they rehab like pro athletes like NFL, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So their claim to fame is professional sports,
Right.
MLS, NFL, MLB,
Mm-hmm.
NBA, all NHL. So all professional athletes will go to their facility for physical rehab or just physical camps, training camps.
Right.
And most notably is the NFL Combine Prep. So any, I won't say any, but most NFL, draftees or like hopefuls that go to the Exos, most of them get picked up. I think they get like an 86% success rate of
Wow.
individuals that go to the combine get drafted into the NFL. So that's their biggest claim to fame. And then they've got corporate gigs as well, corporate.
Right. And the military. I mean, we sent I sent lots and lots of people to Exos, and I even think one of them met some of the pro players before, but it was a sweet gig. I mean, and you're on site, you have to stay nearby, right? You have to go there and pretty much live for that length of time. And so, yeah, so it's a super sweet gig. So, and it's funny. You do what everything you've done, right, over the years, all the training, all your medical background, everything has now just in your, I hate to say, but and your trauma, right? And your recovery of how you recovered all wraps up and you bloomed this amazing nonprofit, right? Shield and Stripes.
Yeah, and I think, with the team that we have that started it and continues to work, and I think everyone's got some sort of investment as far as they understand that they're all either veterans themselves or spouses of active military members, or involved in first responder community, so they all have some sort of trauma.
Right.
They've all addressed it. And it's very intimate to them, and that's very important. And so you have these individuals that have credibility to go out and say, "Hey, it's okay," like to seek out an option for help. And one thing that folks have come to us for is because they can't go to their unit or their whoever's their psychologist because they don't trust them. Number one,
Mm-hmm.
because then they'll end up potentially losing the thing that they wanted, that they valued so much. And I think there's a lot of great programs out there, but this particular method has helped me and several like me because it just going only to a mental health clinician can only do so much.
Agreed.
Working out can do so much, but if you put all of those things together and address every aspect of your body and your mind, and even spirit, then we can really reset the body. And I think, unfortunately, as I look at Congress these days, the VA, they're all looking for like, what's the push button? What's the easy button thing?
Mm-hmm.
We'll give them some pharmaceuticals and then like call that good, or we'll give them some sort of plant-based medicine and we'll call that good. You just got to go take this drug once, and then all your problems are solved.
And it's not.
That's a lot of money, and meanwhile, it's like 15 to 20 years to create all the traumas that we've experienced that, and they've been embedded into our DNA. Well, how do we address that? It's going to take time. In this 3-month program, it's time consuming and it costs a lot to put somebody through there, but the impact is greater than just the individual. It might be the individual, the one person going through the cohort, but it's their family.
I was just going to say,
greatest.
I bet your wife and your kids are appreciative.
Yeah. Like it's the community and the families that see this new individual come out, and that's what I want. I want people to see that is, it takes work. It's not, a plant you can drink or smoke, anything like that. That you can the problem is solved. It's just work, just like it took work to get that trauma. So it takes work to fix this.
I can really appreciate the multimodality approach. You're kind of attacking this from all angles to reach the best outcome there is. And I especially appreciate, too, you mentioned the cohort size is 8. Did I hear that right?
Correct. Yeah, specifically on purpose.
So that way you can keep small, intimate groups versus you walk into a room with 50 other people. It gets a little bit harder to speak and process some of what needs to be done. I think that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And we started with 4, went to 6, got to 8, and we were looking at doing 10. But as we got to 8, there is a potential for an individual to isolate themselves. And individuals like myself, introverts and folks like myself that have trauma, it's easy to isolate. It's I'm not going to hang out tonight. Well, you have a group you're suffering in the gym with, and a group that you're eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner with, and you're sitting in a cold plunge suffering with, and then you're celebrating these victories. And we have mentor time where we talk about these victories. There is no escape, and what I'm afraid if we get too large of groups, that you'd have 2 cliques form.
Yep.
And that's almost that would negatively impact the growth. So it's very important that we keep it small. At least our cohort size is small. So
yeah, that makes sense. So that's impressive.
So for Shields and Stripes, are you looking specifically for veterans who come out of the special operations field, or I know you mentioned too law enforcement, but would this be open for any veteran or specific to those in special warfare?
I prefer actually less the less special warfare. I prefer the conventional force because there are a lot of organizations out there for special operators,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a specific standard of care that we are used to, have all these resources thrown at us while we're in. I would never say no to a special operator, but I want the folks that never had this. I want the people that have never even known something that like this existed. Those infantry and even staff. This doesn't have to be combat trauma. Several of the folks that we see have MST. They've got some sort of military sexual trauma. Law enforcement, when they go through it, the first thing a lot of them say is like, well, I haven't seen what you've seen. Well, I go back and say, I haven't seen what you've seen. Like, I've never shown up to a domestic violence, domestic abuse case. Like, I've never seen a child abuse case in the United States, and let alone be that across my town or down the street from me or from where I live. So I think there's the folks that say that, but there's a lot of, I think they don't want to acknowledge it, but they feel like they're not worthy of the care that they're receiving, and they're more than worthy.
Yeah.
And those are the folks that I want to hit, is the ones that like feel like they're not worthy, but they're more than worthy than, just as worthy as anyone else.
And to see what they can accomplish too, to go from a state of I'm not going to say non-function, but less functioning.
Survival.
And not optimally. Yeah, maybe in a survival mode state to going to thriving, and empowering themselves and thrive. It's a whole different mindset. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I went way over normal. We try to do an hour, but the conversation was way too good. I do have a final question. Do you have green feet?
I do not.
Oh!
As everybody was at the bar getting it, at that line of thinking where I was, the aircrew members, this jolly aircrew members, were also getting it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't feel like getting I wanted something very specific to the community. So what I do have is this the Angel of Mercy here.
Yeah.
I have that tattooed on my back.
So the audience that doesn't know this, the feeling side's probably like, what the hell are we talking about?
Green feet? What are those?
So when you say green feet, we all smirk and think of the PJs. And is PJ specific or Special Forces specific?
It's PJ specific.
PJ specific. Yeah. And so they tattoo on their little tush. Is it anywhere or is it on their butt?
On their butt cheek.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's a fine butt cheek. But they have little green feet on their butt. And so that's what they have tattooed on there. So that's their thing. So we had to ask. I mean, I'm surprised I didn't make it the first question, but
you did good. You did good, Detox. Man, I'm so glad you came and shared some time with us today. This has been incredible conversation, and just appreciate, like I said, you taking the time to do this and get vulnerable and share what that recovery looked like and what you're doing now to help others. This is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on here. It's my pleasure.
All right. Any last thoughts, Steve? Anything you want the audience to kind of remember besides your green feet?
Besides my lack of green feet.
Lack of green feet.
No, I just appreciate if you know anybody that is suffering. This is a simple conversation, and let them know. It's all goes back to the same way of getting through anything. Throughout all my challenges, with selection, when I was going through selection for the special mission unit or to become a DJ, it was always what's next, and it's always an increments. Whether it's the next lunch or it's the next breakfast or it's the next step. There was a time period during the special mission unit selection where we had to walk 40 plus miles with a lot of weight and carrying stuff in our hands, and it felt like glass. But every time I took a step, I was walking on hot coals. But it was always, all right, next step. So same goes for any mental health challenges. It's always, never give up. It's always the next step, and eventually it's going to end.
Yeah, you're right. MC, what you got? Her wheels are spinning. She's processing right now.
It's exactly what this face is. I'm just kind of like, wow. there's a lot of what was shared today, some bits, from working previous cases, some personal, and it's just
Yeah.
all good.
Well, I just want to put out that to make it clear that Shields and Stripes, the reason why it's named Shields and Stripes is because it's first responders and it's military. Am I correct on that? That's where I took a little assumption on that, but it seemed to fit. And so if you are a first responder, civilian or military, or you are a veteran, and this is something you're interested in, you're not sure where to go, you can reach out to us at Bullets to Bedpans and we will gladly connect you with Steve. You can reach out to Shields and Stripes directly. You can reach out to Coming Home Well. They'll get a message to us. Just reach out. So, Steve, thank you so much. I think this was amazing. Really, really awesome. I was so happy we could nail you down because he was trying to nail Jello to the wall, but I got him. I kept like, Michelle, where'd he go? She's like, oh, he's on a world tour. And I'm like, okay, get him when he comes back.
Yeah, I still train PJs and still travel around. So I was doing last week, and
Good.
I'll be out next week training some PJs out in Vegas. So
Awesome. All right. So from all of us here at Bullets to Bedpans, Z, we're out.
Take care. Stay safe.
All right, everybody. Peace out.